Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Dude, I Love That. I'm Liv, and today we're continuing the Summer Throwback Enneagram series with one of the best movies of the early 2000s, A Cinderella Story. I mean, really though, how do you get much better than Chad Michael Murray, Hilary Duff, and Jennifer Coolidge? That I don't know, but we're going to be diving into these characters and their Enneagram types in this episode. And we're doing it in 20 minutes or less. So let's go ahead and jump in with Sam, who's obviously played by Hilary Duff. This was so fun for me because I grew up watching this movie all the time, but I really felt like her character was the perfect example of a six wing five. And she's definitely a self preserving six. If you don't know what self preserving means, that is a subtype. There are three subtypes: there's social, self preserving, and one called sexual, which is also referred to as one to one. And the self preserving six really comes across quite two ish. And so a lot of times, females who are sixes, but they have a self preserving subtype, they mistype as a type two. So that's a great hint if you're someone that maybe you tested and you got a type two and you're like, this isn't really feeling like me, check into a self-preserving six because you might find your type there. But one of the things for me that really solidified that Sam is a six wing five is the fact that she is someone that is so concerned about not wanting to get in trouble. And that's something, of course, the six deals a lot with fear. And I think over time, she's seen the repercussions of what happens when she doesn't follow Fiona's orders. And so in order to limit that stress and all that comes with disobeying her, she's like, you know what, I'm just going to totally comply and do whatever she wants. Now remember, sixes are in the compliant stance. So the compliant stance is sixes, twos, and ones. So what happens is when conflict comes or when they're in a stressful situation, what they do is they comply to what's being asked instead of like the aggressive stance, which is going to be the sevens, eights, and threes. They're going to more push towards you and be like, hey, wait a second. The compliant stance, they're going to be like, never mind, it's okay, I'll just go along with what you want in order to reduce friction. And so that's what we see her do throughout the movie. And then, of course, at the end, she really is like, you know what? No, I'm not going to deal with this anymore. And she stands up to Fiona, which props to her. That was amazing. But some other things to me that really solidified the fact that she is a six is the fact that she's so loyal. And you usually see sixes that have like a small group of close friends versus a really large group of acquaintances. That's kind of not where they want to spend their energy more often than not. They want to have people that, you know, they truly trust that they can build that relationship with and that they know are going to be there for them like they'll be there for them. Hopefully that made sense. It was a little convoluted, but you know what I mean. And so that's definitely one thing that I was like, yes, 100%. The other thing, she's taking so many classes and she's always had this vision of where she wants to go. She's had her sights set on Princeton and she has done whatever needs to be done in order to get there because she's willing to sacrifice in the short term for what's to come in the long term. And that's something that, you know, people often think that fives are the studious ones or the ones that are most interested in school or education, whatever it is. Actually, sixes are the ones that are more interested in that. You're going to find them more in academia than a five. And you see fives a lot, you know, they're researchers. Obviously, they love investigating things and getting really niched down in what they love. But the six is going to be the type that is gathering a lot of information because they want to feel prepared. The five, in contrast, like I said, is a bit more niched. And then, of course, she's able to be really vulnerable with Austin when she meets him at the dance. And so that's one thing that you're going to find from the six, because if they feel like, obviously she's had this time building up trust with him, and so she's gotten to know him and away from like she kind of did like Love is Blind with him, you know what I mean? She kind of was like, let's just get to know each other without actually being near each other or seeing each other, and that way whatever we have is really genuine and authentic. And I think that's something that you're going to see from that type six, because like I said, they're really interested in building not like wide relationships, but deep relationships. They want to know that there's a lot of loyalty and a solid foundation there because that's important to them. If you're going to be in their life, they need to know that the loyalty goes both ways. They don't want to be around people that are flaky or that aren't really being their true self. They're like, if you're not being your honest self and if you're flaking out on me, then that means I can't trust you, which means you're a threat to me in an essence. And so that's why we see, you know, Sam kind of has obviously the people that she works with at the diner, but then she just has Carter as her really close friend because he's proven himself to be exactly who he says he is. And obviously that ends up kind of being the point of contention between her and Austin because she's like, you're this way one time and then you're this way another time with other people. And it's like, okay, well, which one are you? Because you can't be both. And that's really the crux of the matter when she confronts him. And that's one thing I love about sixes. They are really good at cutting through the crap and being like, okay, what is the situation here? Because you need to choose a side. And we do see a little bit more of that black and white thinking from sixes than I think people want to admit. I think people tend to be like, oh, ones are very black and white, or like eights are black and white. But really, the six is able to do that not in a judgmental way, but in a way of cutting through the BS in order to find out, okay, what is the truth? And I really do think that a six is a truth seeker, especially like the counterphobic six. I think they really do pull on some of that eight and that one. And not that they have connections to those numbers, but I do think they do have some of those similar qualities. And so that's where I think, oh, and of course, six has a connection to nine. And so nines are able to really see all sides of a situation. And that's where I think we get a lot of that from that type six. And then I did give her that five wing because she definitely is not sevenish at all. She's very much focused. She's, like I said, she's taking on all this stuff for school and she's working like pretty much full time. So, she's got a lot on her plate, but she's really able to bide her time and not work herself to death. I think she's really good at focusing her mental energy where it needs to go instead of kind of being like scatterbrained. And so, again, I think we see more of that type five steadiness and stability from her versus if she had the seven wing, she'd be a little bit more energetic, a little bit more wanting excitement, wanting to focus on the fun things. And I don't think she'd be as compliant with Fiona. Oh my gosh. Let's talk about my boy Carter. He's my favorite character of this entire thing. I honestly love him. He is so funny. He is literally the unsung hero of this entire freaking movie. So I ended up typing Carter. Originally, I was like, is he a four? And I think that's kind of like the cheap shot answer. People are like, oh, they're into acting. Oh, they like characters. They have to be a four. Wrong. Fours are very much caricatured, whatever the word is, as being these like thespian kind of like dramatic people, I guess, for lack of a better word. And I don't think that's always the case. There's a lot of fours that you wouldn't even know they're a four because they literally come across completely differently. They come across very two-ish or even very seven-ish. And I don't think that's the case in this scenario because I'm about to tell you his type. But I do think that we need to get out of the space of just thinking like, oh, fours are actors, fours are blah, blah, blah. They're artists, they're this. There's a lot more going on there. And I really hit on that in the last song episode when we talked about Ronnie. We broke it all down in that one. But I do think that Carter is a type seven. Now, you might be like, why is he a seven? What the heck? Carter is very much scatterbrained in the sense of he has so many things that are begging for his attention and he wants to give his attention to everything. And so he's trying to do that. And that's what we see from sevens. They're so good at getting work done. They're so ambitious. And that's something I did talk about in the Top Gun episode when we were talking about Goose. The thing I just really hate people thinking about sevens is the fact that they're like, oh, they're not like achieving. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to put in any hard work. I'll tell you right now, sevens are some of the most high achieving people on the entire Enneagram. And the reason you don't understand that right off the bat or you don't see it is because they do it with such an ease and a smile on their face and they love what they're doing. And that's where usually people that are achieving as high of things as they are, you're going to hear a little bit more of, oh, it's so stressful or whatever. They're going to find that glass half full approach because, of course, the seven is always reframing things into a positive light. And so it doesn't come across that way to you that they're actually super high achievers. But I'm telling you, sevens are some of the best business owners and high achieving people you'll ever meet. And so I think that we see that for Carter in terms of he's really always working on his craft. He wants to do some sort of acting and he's always putting himself in different characters and trying to embody them and see like, okay, what is the situation here? What can I actually like squeeze the most life out of this and understand it? And that's something that you're going to see from that type seven who really wants to kind of master something and then move on. And the four is going to tend to sit in that a little bit more. They're going to want to really sit in the depth of that character and come up with this backstory and something incredible. Whereas the seven, he's kind of trying something new every day. And so that's where I think it's a really great example of the seven versus the four. Now, for Carter, we see a lot of that nervous energy. And that's something that, initially you might not think that a seven deals with anxiety, but they're in the head triad. The head triad, remember, that's fives, sixes, and sevens. And so a lot of times the seven, it doesn't quite come across like anxiety. It comes across as a bit of like nervous energy because, again, they're trying to positively reframe. And so they're like, I'm not anxious, I'm excited. But we see him doing that, especially in the scene where they're driving back from the dance and she's late. And of course, they end up seeing Fiona, and he's like, I'm driving as fast as I can, Sam. And she's telling him, step on it. What are you doing? And he's like, I'm going 37 and a 35. That for me, I was like, 100% this guy's a 7-wing-6, because the 7, when they do start to feel anxiety, it kind of comes on and there's no stopping it. Like once it's to that point, it's downhill. And so that's what we see from him, where he gets to the point where it's like, I'm driving as fast as I can and I'm being held back, because the 7 hates being like boxed in basically. And so he's like, I can't go any more than the speed limit because then I can get in trouble. He's definitely more cautious than a 7-wing-8. And so we see that from him. And he really does try and positively reframe things for Sam in her life, because of course that's his best friend. And he's also trying to problem solve with her a lot. And that's where you're going to see that from the 7-wing-6 versus the 7-wing-8. And speaking of 8s, let's talk about my absolute girl, Rhonda. Now, she doesn't require much detail here, because I think it's pretty clear that she is a type 8. She's extremely protective. And we see at the end of the movie that she says she stayed in this bad job simply to protect Sam. And so that's what you're going to see from that type 8. When they feel like there's someone that can't stand up for themselves because they've been put in a really bad situation, or something like an animal or a baby, that's where you're really going to see 8s have that protective side. They're going to be like, no, I'll step up to the plate, come under my wing. I'm strong enough for the both of us. And so that's what we love about our 8s. They're so good at protecting those around them, and they take on the duty with a sense of justice and a sense of, this isn't right. And so I'm going to do something about it. And a lot of times people feel like, yeah, that's not right, but they're not willing to do something about it. The 8s realize it's not right and then put it into action. And so that's what we love about the type 8. And again, Rhonda is the first one to say, oh, Sam can come live with me if she needs somewhere. Or, hey, you need to go to that dance, defy Fiona. And of course, the type 8's always like, hey, they're trying to pull one over on you, or they're trying to limit you. Don't let them do that. And so they're always the ones that, instead of like the type 7 who positively reframes, the 8 always kind of reframes it to be like, are you being controlled here? Is something going on? Is this shady? And, more often than not, it is shady. And that's why they're calling it out. And so we see that from her all the time. And Rhonda's really the one that takes on the majority of the crap, because she literally is like covered in armor, and everything that Fiona says rolls right off of her. She's like, whatever. Now, speaking of Fiona, holy cow, this lady, I freaking love Jennifer Coolidge. She's so funny. Actually, in the post that I'm doing for this episode, it should be up already, I have a bunch of Fiona quotes from this movie, because of course there were just too many to not include. And so check it out if you're interested. But Fiona, initially, I was like, oh, she's a type 3. However, I realized later, while really paying attention while watching the movie, because other times you're just watching it, you're just like enjoying. This time I was really trying to figure out, what is her type? What is her motivation? And then I realized she's not a 3-wing-4, she's a 4-wing-3. And this is something where everything that she does is so based out of that 4 envy. I think a lot of people don't understand, when they see someone that is as overt as Fiona, they initially kind of want to slap a 3 sticker on it and be like, oh, that's them. The 3 that's trying so hard to embrace a persona that they think will be well liked, be that kind of perfect role model, if you will. And that's not what we see from Fiona. Everything she does is out of a very intense desire to embrace the perfection that she wants and to reach a certain status. And we see she does that type 4 thing of kind of putting people into hierarchies or categories. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just, of course, Fiona's like the villain of the movie. So 4s, if you're out there, don't get offended. I'm not saying this about you. I'm just saying this about her, because obviously she's been molded into this complete caricature of this type. And she's obviously taking on all the bad qualities of it, because hello, she's the villain of the movie. And so I think what we see from her is that she kind of views herself up here, and then everybody else that works for her is like the lower class. And she really takes that on, and she kind of says, you're down here, you'll do whatever I say, I pay your bills, I blah blah blah. And so she kind of lords that over people, and yet she does nothing to embrace a leadership mentality. She wants the authority of a leader, but she doesn't want to take on the actual qualities of a leader. And so I think that's what we're really getting there from Fiona. And then one of the other things that I found very interesting about her, she when Rhonda asked, "Hey, where'd you get your boobs done?" Because I was thinking about it. Of course, she's just trying to distract her, but Fiona doesn't want to give up the name because, again, that type 4, they want to be the unique one. Like, they don't want someone ripping off their style. And that's something that you'll see from 4s in all health levels, because of course they want to embrace authenticity and they feel like this is actually me. And if you're asking for it, it's like, is that not really you? Are you trying to copy me? Which of course, imitation is the highest form of flattery. But to the 4, it's like, that's not authentic. That's not you being unique. That's you trying to rip off my uniqueness. And so we see her be like, you can't know where I got my boobs done. That's for me to know and you to never know. And so that's what I love about about her character. It's just like, what is going to come out of her mouth next? And then of course, she's so full of envy and she can't let anybody else be happy. She has to find something to ruin them. And of course, because 4s are so empathetic, when you get in those low health levels, what can happen is you use your ability to have empathy and to understand people's problems, and you actually use it, you turn it against them and kind of use it as a weapon. And so you know right where to hit them, where it's going to hurt the most. And that's something that isn't necessarily even a 4 trait per se, but this is how it's being used in a pop culture sense of trying to create that villain character. And so we see we see Fiona do that with Sam and her Princeton acceptance, and kind of how she frames it to be like, you're not very smart, you're not very pretty, and that's why you'll never get anything, but I'm going to do something for you. I'll give you a job, I'll give you a life. You can exist in my world. And that is something that, of course, is so screwed up, but that's just how the villain of the movie is. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about our last person, Austin Ames, who, of course, is Chad Michael Murray. And raise your hand if Chad Michael Murray was it for you in the early 2000s. So cute. But I actually decided that Austin was a type 9. And I'm thinking about it right now. Did I type Chad's character in One Tree Hill as a type 9? Did I type Lucas as a 9? You'll have to go fact check me on that one because I might have. But he is the kind of person that his family kind of has this ideal for him. And he's very much caught in the middle of, do I go along with what they want, or do I go against it? And of course, what we see him do is he's like, I'm going to keep going along with it until the very last minute. And that's something that 9s kind of can fall asleep to their own desires because of what other people want from them. And because the 9, they're so good at molding and mirroring and merging with people, that's where they get so asleep to their own desires that they end up not making a move at all. And they just kind of go with the flow. And this is something that I talked about in the last song episode with Will. He's kind of like, I do want this thing, but I'm trapped by what my family wants. And so again, that's the same with Austin. He's kind of got this path laid out for him. And then he's at the decision point where he has to say, okay, do I just bite the bullet and go for it? Or am I going to regret it so much if I don't go with what I want? And at the end, he ends up doing what he wants. But I don't know if he would have done it had it not been exposed right in front of his dad that he did want to go to USC. No, I'm sorry. He wants to go to Princeton. His dad wanted him to go to USC. And so had that situation not happened, I really wonder if he would have confronted his dad and said, I want to go to Princeton. So that's really interesting to think about. But of course, he's so good at letting things happen around him, but he doesn't want to directly get involved, especially with his girlfriend and his friends. They're cracking jokes, they're saying things that he doesn't agree with, but he wants to keep the peace. And so he doesn't say anything, even when he knows things are wrong. And I think throughout the movie, we see a progression of him starting to say, hey, I don't agree with that. You shouldn't say that. That's mean. And so maybe he's leaning more on that 8 wing and he's getting a little bit more bold. We see that he really does want to go for what he wants once he finds it. And so that's what I think is really special about the 9 that wakes up. It's really easy to get in those sloth states. And I know this because I have a connection to 9. So if you're out there and you're feeling that slothness, 9s, I get it. But for him, he was feeling that. And then he quickly snaps out of it and actually rises up and really embraces the intensity and the incredibleness of the type 9, where they're awake and they're ready and they're actually going for what they want instead of waiting for it to come to them, or completely falling asleep to it in an entirety and not going forward at all and then regretting it later. All right, that's it for this episode. I really hope that you enjoyed. Be sure and check back on Tuesday for a brand new episode because we have new episodes airing every Tuesday and Friday. And then, of course, check in on Instagram at Hey, it's Liv James. That's where I post all the behind the scenes content. You can find links to the episodes, clickable links in the stories and in the bio, and all of that good stuff. So be sure and check it out. Also, I have little vibe posts where I do that for every episode. So I find like really cool behind the scenes photos and put those up for you. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.